Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
We forget too easily that people's lives can change in just a matter of minutes. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you're in the seats with, once more, as always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and we pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in light and conversational fashion. And if you like how we do things around here, you can always subscribe to the podcast. You may have already, but if you haven't, please do so. You can find us over to Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel. So if you can give us a like and subscribe there as well, we'd really appreciate it. Also, don't hesitate to check us out on social media. You can find us over at Facebook, over at Twitter, and over at Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of fun updates. And finally, and I do dare say most importantly, please pay us a visit at In the Seats, intheseats.ca for all the latest and greatest from the world of film, television, film festivals, basically the moving image at large. If it's something that we're writing about and talking about it, we love it if you're going to come by and read about it. So please don't hesitate to stop on by. On this episode, we've got an interesting one. We are diving into the film 13 Minutes, which is in theaters, but it's also going to be on video on demand platforms pretty soon. It's an intense drama that takes us to a heartland town following four families when a massive storm hits, and they literally only have 13 minutes to get to shelter when the largest tornado on record ravages the town and basically hits the reset button for everyone as they're fighting for their lives in the wake of this total devastation, and everyone has to sort of figure out a way to overcome their differences and find their own personal strength inside themselves in order to come through this on the other side. And it's again, it's one of those films that, I mean, we've seen tornado movies before, but they've been a little exploitative and a little bit flashy. But I think this one really gets down to the human drama of these issues and what happens when all of a sudden your life is completely upended and everything is destroyed, and what do you do and how do you find a way to push through that? It's a really interesting film, and we had the unique pleasure of sitting down not only with writer-director Lindsay Gossling about the film, but also her co-writer Travis Farncombe, who just happens to be a real-life storm chaser, which I thought was kind of neat. But we talk about sort of the origins of the story for the film and trying to give audiences something that is as grounded in reality as humanly possible. And it's a fascinating watch, and I do hope you check it out either in theaters or coming to video on demand platforms pretty soon. But first off, please enjoy our talk with Lindsay and Travis, because between you and me, it's a good one. All right, well, Lindsay, Travis, obviously, first off, just thank you so much for the time today, and congratulations on the film.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having us.
No, I mean, I guess my first question is just like, walk me through the inspiration for the story, because I mean, honestly, whenever we have seen sort of hurricane movies or tornado movies in the past, they've been action movies. This was not an action movie. Like, walk me through, I guess, sort of the initial idea to tell this story this way.
So, I mean, I'm happy that either of us can field that one.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
So, Travis is a storm chaser and does a lot of work with a company called Impact WX, and they really try to help improve messaging to keep people safe during storms and help in the aftermath of storms. And we were talking one day about all of the work they're doing with tornado messaging, and they've got meteorologists working with behavioral psychologists to try to get people to respond properly to weather warnings. And the more we started talking about all of the different communication problems that they had, people who just ignore the message and think, I know what to do, or they get confused by mixed messaging and outdated advice, or they don't understand because of language barriers. And we were, really thinking about the part of the world that this happens in. And bit by bit, we started to build this world and sort of ascribe some of these problems to different characters, but put them in places that are very like real and meaningful and current to the world today. So, we built this sort of microcosm of global issues that the world will then be blown apart. And we'll see what happens to our characters.
And that's exactly right. And I would add, David, that, so many tornado movies and natural disaster movies, they're fun, but there's not enough meat on the bones, maybe. And we wanted the movie to, have the action, have the impact, have the thrill, but also have the realism. And so it was important to Lindsay and I that, we take you in 13 minutes into the lives of these characters. We don't just run with storm chasers, which happens in a lot of tornado movies. We get you into the lives of the people who are actually impacted by an event like this. And I think that's what makes 13 minutes so unique and so special.
Now, I mean, I guess that dovetails into my next question for you, Travis. I mean, is 13 minutes the actual number, given all the advancements we've had in science and everything these days? Like, is that literally the number? Like, if something's coming their way?
That is the average that, the number that they put out there and say, this is the average fluctuates, but the current one is about 13 minutes. But the truth of the matter is, sometimes you have 20 minutes, and sometimes the warning doesn't pop up on your phone until after your house is destroyed. Yeah. And so really what's so important here is that in 13 minutes, what we're talking about is the time that you have and what you do with the time that you have. Do you respond properly? Are you listening to the warnings? Are you believing the warnings? Do you know what your plan is? And all of our characters in the film have these amazing human dramas that take them to a place and intersect with the impact of this monstrous tornado. And really it's about their instinct to survive. And that's what the film is all about.
No, I mean, I think you sum it up pretty well. And I mean, there's a line in the film that, if the boy cries wolf too many times, people are just going to sort of turn it out. And I mean, I got to imagine that's a hard universe to be living in, especially when you're trying to sort of prepare for these kind of things. How important was it for you both to really, I guess, give us sort of the boots on the ground sense from the people who are trying to help and the people who are responding and the people who are living in the paths of these, storms that happen far more often than most of us outside of these places tend to admit?
I think this is probably one for you, Travis. This is more sort of a real world, how people respond on the ground, in the tornado alleys.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, people have different understandings of threat. And in this movie, we tried to show a spectrum of understanding and a spectrum of belief. And so people in the film, the characters in the film, they all have different reasons, different storylines, different arcs that play into how they behave during that critical moment of response. So we really tried to illustrate an array of what can go right and what can go wrong. And our hope is that audiences will come out of this film, and the next time they're driving on the interstate and they get a tornado warning on their phone, they think about where Carlos was in the film and maybe what could have gone better for him, and then have their kind of cultural memory ingrained that helps them understand what they should do. But all the way along in this film, in the moments leading up to the film, all the way through into the aftermath, we stayed true to the language, to the phrases. It was so critical to us that we were accurate about, the term tornado watch, the term tornado warning. Even after the film, in the background, there's a moment where the radio reporter is saying, stay off the roads, make space for emergency responders to come and do their jobs. All the way through the film, we've loaded it with these real moments of important messaging that are just so important.
Well, and I mean, there was a moment in the film that really struck me, and I think you can probably speak to this, Lindsay, where just the news reporter has to sort of leave mid-broadcast. And I mean, I've got to imagine those are stories that you can pull from real life. And I'm just curious, when you're trying to give this as much of a grounded and real feeling as possible, were there any elements in there where it was a question of, okay, maybe I have to dial this up a little bit for cinematic purposes, or was it all as really sort of true to what has actually happened in the past?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, there's definitely poetic license, and we're pumping things up for dramatic purposes. I think in Oklahoma, in Tornado Alley, a lot of the meteorologists are superstars. I mean, they're so well known. They're some of our local crew were like, oh no, they would never walk off. No, if the building was coming down, they'd keep broadcasting. But for dramatic purposes, I mean, that moment for Brad when he sees that what has happened and that not knowing what has happened to your family, I think we really feel his mental, emotional, what do I do? And he's just got to go. So, yeah.
I also love just in terms of how the storm really felt like a break in the narrative. It wasn't a question of, you weren't glamorizing the storm or sort of overly highlighting the storm. It was like the buildup, it happens, then the aftermath. How important was it to make the storm this chaotic moment in the middle of everything?
So the accuracy of the skies and the storm day was essential. I mean, we really wanted to create a story that was grounded in the real world and was authentic all the way through. And so we are true to the weather patterns of a storm day. What would happen for this specific type of rain-wrapped tornado. So from the very outset, where we start with a pre-dawn thunderstorm and the sky's clear and it's beautiful blue skies, and building and growing, the way the clouds evolve in the background is meteorologically accurate all the way through, thanks to so much of Travis's consultation and sourcing many skies. We dropped in and replaced the majority of the skies in the film. And my hope, from a dramatic standpoint, the tornado is it's the biggest antagonist in the film. It's the beast. It's the thing that's going to rip this world apart. And I think knowing that this is a tornado movie, knowing what is going to happen, as humans, we'll be attuned to those subtle shifts in the sky and the cloud, and it will act as its own, the tension is growing, and we realize it's just because the clouds are changing, along with the human drama that's happening in front of us. But that connection to nature, hopefully people will be really in tune with as well.
Lindsay, can you talk a little bit just about trying to find the right people for each of your sort of intersecting stories? Because I mean, from Thora to Amy to Yancey to Paz, there were so many great performances in this film. I've got to imagine a lot of the job was stressing out during the casting process to make sure to find the right people to pair together. We
all feel so incredibly lucky to have secured the cast that we did. It was incredible, and every one of them gave such tremendous performances. And again, that's part of it, feeling real and authentic. The authenticity that we feel in this movie comes from those performances. And it starts bit by bit. Definitely we have some name cast that we went out to from the outset, and we're really hoping that they would come on board. And as we know this is a draw. I mean, it's exciting, thrilling tornado movie, but it's also a human drama, and each one of those characters is going through their own personal drama, and many of them are facing issues that are very, very challenging. And I think we were lucky to find some actors who really connected with some of those issues for whatever reason, and then just came on board from that. And we had phenomenal casting directors. They helped us to find some of the lesser known actors whose performances are just incredible in this film. For us, Shaylee Mansfield, who plays Peyton, was such a discovery. they brought her to us, and as soon as we saw her, we just knew straight away that was Peyton.
I would add that in all of the casting process, I think like there were so many filmmakers involved in the process, and the one thing that was so wonderful about the experience of the casting process was just that we talked about whether or not we could see reflections of these characters in the actors that we were talking about. Could we see them as Tammy? Could we see them as Rick, as Peyton? And so making sure that we all really believed that the talent that we went out to, and they were amazing, and it turns out in the film, in no small part to our director, but it's so important to just stop and think about whether this person belongs in the role that they're being considered for.
No, I mean, I guess my next question would be for you, Travis, because I mean, I'm curious, obviously with your experience working sort of in the storm community and storm chasing, like in my brain, my first reaction is, oh, why didn't they make a documentary? But when watching the film, it really feels like if you had done this documentary style, the human aspect of it may not have really hammered home, and it needed to be more of a scripted thing. How important was it for you to really have something that focused on the human cost of what happens in these places like these tornado alleys?
So I am taking no credit for the fact that this was not a documentary. I think I originally talked to Lindsay about it as a potential documentary, and Lindsay said, what about if we look at a feature film and really look at that form of storytelling where I think you can have an even greater impact. Yeah. And looking back now, I am so grateful that was her response to me then, because the most important thing for all of us was that we do ground this film in the lives of the characters. That yes, everyone is going to talk about the tornado, of course, but they're also going to talk about what Maddie was going through, and what Jess experienced that day, and what Carlos and Anna went through. And so ultimately, I think that being able to take this and make it a feature film where you can really explore people and disasters in that way, it was everything.
Now, I'm curious from both your perspectives, because watching the film really does hammer home the fact that, I mean, no matter what walk of life we're from or wherever we're from, there will always be these sort of unifying moments across sort of humanity in general. And I mean, it's one of those things which I think is just a reminder of, the fact that we're all together on this stupid little blue marble that we call Earth, quote unquote. But what is it about, I guess, those moments in film where we really have those compelling sort of moments, and we really feel it, that appeal to both of you as, like, not just as filmmakers, but as storytellers and as people, really?
So for me, I mean, so much of this film, and as much as it is about survival, across the board, social, emotional, right, cultural, physical survival, it's also about how we see the world in our own worlds and the wider world. And I think at the outset, all the characters, they're somewhat caught up in their own lives and their own problems and somewhat inward looking. And then the tornado is this disastrous event, natural event that strikes somewhat out of the blue, and it acts as a leveler, and it levels that world. And in the immediate aftermath, all differences are erased. It churns all of these lives and throws them together and tosses them together and forces them to work together. And I think in reality, that happens so often with natural disasters, where everybody helps each other in the aftermath. Everybody comes together. And then often in the days and weeks afterwards, life just goes back to normal, and divisions and divides come up again. And, my hope is that with this film, in that aftermath, when we see that great sweeping scope of destruction, we will think about, the perspective is shifted. It's no longer inward looking, it's outward looking, and we can see far and wide, and ask whether how we rebuild that world in the future. Will we rebuild it better than it was before? And I hope that that's what people will come away thinking.
You, Travis?
Yeah, well, that's tough to follow, but I will say, you know what for me is so cool about film, and this film in particular, is that you have the creative license to tell stories any way that you want them. And we decided very deliberately that we would tell a story of survival, and we could do it in such a way that we could talk about physical, we could talk about emotional survival, and the just surviving the conflicts and the small intrigues of our daily lives and relationships, but we could do it um, uh, in parallel with the idea of surviving this massive physical event. So you have so much freedom to play with metaphor and meaning. And I think that with this film, I guess with any film, there's such a responsibility to tell stories well and properly, because people are going to come out of this film talking about what Maddie went through, what Luke went through, what Tammy went through, and everyone is going to have a different idea of who was heroic and who wasn't, and who survived right and who survived wrong. But ultimately it's going to be a conversation. And so I think that's just the amazing thing about film for me.
No, and I think you're right. And I mean, I definitely think this is a film that can spark conversation, because it is a reminder, especially after any kind of tragedy, just to know how to put that one foot in front of the other and understand sort of how to keep going on and try to make the world a better place, just by being in it, for for lack of a better term. But just, what, I just want to say congratulations to you both on a fantastic film, and thank you both for the time today.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Bye, guys. And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.